Hello, so I'm going to be looking at identifying effective structural devices, and this time I'm looking at Peter Pan as my text. So the question, as always, pretty much stays the same. So you now need to think about the whole of the source. This text is from the beginning of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. So this is our little bit of context then. So this text is taken from the start of Peter Pan, written by J.M. Barrie, published in 1904. The excerpt introduces the Darling family and the monetary struggles they had whilst raising a family. So I'm choosing to look at transitions and perspective then. So I'm going to read over the entirety of the source given to you, and then we will look at my what a good one looks like. All children except one grow up. They soon know that they will grow up, and the way Wendy knew was this. One day when she was 2 years old, she was playing in a garden, and she plucked another flower and ran with it to her mother. I suppose she must have looked rather delightful, for Mrs. Darling put her hand to her heart and cried, "Oh, why can't you remain like this for ever?" This was all that passed between them on the subject, but henceforth Wendy knew that she must grow up. You always know after you are 2. 2 is the beginning of the end. Of course they lived at 14, their house number on the street, and until Wendy came her mother was the chief one. She was a lovely lady, with a romantic mind and such a sweet mocking mouth. Her romantic mind was like the tiny boxes, one within the other, that come from the puzzling East. However many you discover, there is always one more, and her sweet mocking mouth had one kiss on it that Wendy could never get, though there it was, perfectly conspicuous in the right-hand corner. The way Mr. Darling won her was this. The many gentlemen who had been boys when she was a girl discovered simultaneously that they loved her, and they all ran to her house to propose to her, except Mr. Darling, who took a cab and nipped in first, and so he got her. He got all of her, except the innermost box and the kiss. He never knew about the box, and in time he gave up trying for the kiss. Wendy thought Napoleon could have got it, but I can picture him trying and then going off in a passion, slamming the door. Mr. Darling used to boast to Wendy that her mother not only loved him but respected him. He was one of those deep ones who know about stocks and shares. Of course no one really knows, but he quite seemed to know, and he often said stocks were up and shares were down in a way that would have made any woman respect him. Mrs. Darling was married in white, and at first she kept the books perfectly, almost gleefully, as if it were a game, not so much as a Brussels sprout was missing. But by and by whole cauliflowers dropped out, and instead of them there were pictures of babies without faces. She drew them when she should have been totting up. They were Mrs. Darling's guesses. Wendy came first, then John, then Michael. For a week or two after Wendy came, it was doubtful whether they would be able to keep her, as she was another mouth to feed. Mr. Darling was frightfully proud of her, but he was very honourable, and he sat on the edge of Mrs. Darling's bed, holding her hand and calculating expenses. While she looked at him imploringly, she wanted to risk it, come what might, but that was not his way. His way was with a pencil and a piece of paper, and if she confused him with suggestions, he had to begin at the beginning again. So, what a good one looks like then. The author transitions using some terminology from the narrator looking over the scene of Wendy and her mother. One day when she was 2 years old, she was playing, in the first paragraph, to a reflective third paragraph detailing how Mr. and Mrs. Darling came to be married. So I'm saying how they're doing it, why they're transitioning, is what I'm going to come to next. So my quotation, Mr. Darling, who took a cab and nipped in first. This change in focus, so I'm saying why, now I'm using a little bit more terminology as well, allows the reader to learn as to how Wendy came to be, as well as providing important characterisation. The phrase Mr. Darling, who took a cab and nipped in first, demonstrates the playful but clever nature of Mr. Darling, as well as contributing a pleasant, gentle mood to the text. Again, so I'm talking about mood, that's another structural feature. By introducing Mr. Darling's character in such a way, the author could promote a feeling of warmness in the reader. So I'm telling the examiner why I think that J.M. Barrie has opted to do this, why he's changed from first to third, and how that is important for the reader.